Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com, here with great recent recordings of the classics. And today we're talking about this unbelievable, exciting sonic blockbuster, the Respighi Fountains and Pines and Festivals of Rome. The Roman Trilogy with the Sao Paulo Symphony Orchestra under John Neschling on the BIS label. It's an SACD, and it was recorded in 2010. So these are all past the turn of the century. These are great recordings for the 21st century. Now, this particular performance, the performances are marvelous. They really are. And if you've got a good sound system, one where you can really crank it up, oh boy, are you in for a treat. Holy cow, it's just astonishing. The sonic, shall we say, the aesthetics of sound in recordings like this are very different from those in the great recordings of yesteryear. The reference recordings, for example, The Pines of Rome, is Fritz Reiner with the Chicago Symphony. And that was recorded in, the late 1950s or something like that. It still sounds amazing. Absolutely amazing. But it depends on what your aesthetic preferences are. Now, I had a guy set up my stereo system, and a bunch of you are saying, you don't tell us what you listen on. Well, I listen on a whole bunch of different things, and that's as far as I'm going with it. Some high end, some less than high end, and it gives me a good perspective. Someone actually said to me, I have an obligation to reveal my sound system so that people can judge whether or not my evaluations are correct or not. Is that horse shit? I'm not rising to that bait. Anyway, the bottom line is, I had a guy who was putting in, when I moved to this new establishment here, was helping me put my systems back together. And I had to get a new amplifier. And so, he sort of knew classical music and was interested. And so I was playing him, different recordings of things. And one of the things I played to show him the difference in technique in recording these things was the Reiner versus this one. Because the Reiner has, as its whole raison d'etre, clarity and appropriateness to home listening, I would say. I really would. In other words, these guys set up the microphones and put together a sonic picture, which is absolutely marvelous when you're listening at home. You hear all the main lines, the things that come to the surface. The harps at the beginning of The Pines of Rome have a tactile sensuousness that no other recording has ever approached. Is it natural? Is that what the thing sounds like live? Well, no, not really. But it works fabulously well, not live, which is, of course, what the recording is. It's the recording as a whole unique object of art and representation of the work in and of itself, that because it's not the same as a live event, doesn't have to sound the same as a live event. Well, all that has changed. It changed really rather substantively when the whole digital recording thing came along. Partly it was because these brilliant producers who knew how to make those recordings were all gone. They were really gone. And the idea of the ability to make a decent sounding digital recording by just hanging a couple of microphones up in a hall was it allowed people to make lots of records cheaply, especially of live recordings, because you have to take what you can get, and you're trying to avoid audience noise, and your whole conception is a little bit different. And so there were always people who were doing it that way back in the day as well. But, I'm talking about in gross generalities. So today, what you're much more likely to get in the best sounding recordings is an approximation of what you might hear of an orchestra in a room with plenty of acoustic around it and a very, very wide dynamic range, which may or may not work on your home system. And the best recordings, of course, are thrilling, but they're thrilling in a totally different way. And this is a very good test case, if you have that Reiner recording, to compare it, because because the orchestra is further away from the microphones. You don't have all of the spotlighting of various instrumental parts. The big climaxes really expand to fill the space, and you don't have that laser-like clarity that you have in those Reiner recordings, even at very high volumes. Here, it all kind of comes together to make a big general sound, a glorious general sound, and I love it. I really do. The performances, as I said, are absolutely terrific, but the sound is quite different. And I think that when some people have said they want to hear more modern recordings, they want to hear recent recordings of the classics that have modern sound, some have actually said that, this may be what they have in mind, or something like this, something where if you've bothered to get high-end equipment and you really have the power to drive your speakers and they're not going to explode, you will hear an absolutely fantastic approximation of the sound of an orchestra in a hall. And so these are splendid versions for that reason. They're wonderful for themselves. They sound fabulous. I have them on my iPod. I can listen to them on headphones. They're great. Absolutely great. And they are quite recent. So I leave it to you to discover these performances. There's a whole Respighi series with Neschling. It's been a little bit variable. There are some great things and some less great things, but this is where you would start. It's all been boxed up, too, if you want to get the whole box. And the sound here is absolutely stunning. And I think that's the point. So keep on listening, friends. Thanks for joining me. Take care.